Grief makes the world feel finished before God has spoken his final word. That is where this passage begins. Not with trumpets, not with a crowd shouting victory, not with a woman arriving at a tomb full of expectation. Mary comes carrying sorrow like a weight in her chest. She comes to a place that feels sealed, settled, over. She is not looking for resurrection. She is looking for a body. John 20 says, "But Mary stood outside by the tomb, weeping." Just that. She stood there. She wept there. She did not yet understand that heaven had already invaded the grave behind her tears. Maybe that is closer to your life than you want to admit. You prayed, and the answer did not come. You loved, and the thing still broke. You trusted God for something beautiful, and now all you can see is the stone, the silence, the place where hope was laid down. You are not asking for a miracle anymore. You are just trying to understand what was taken. Mary looks into the tomb, and even when angels speak to her, her grief is still louder than her understanding. They ask, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she says, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Listen to that closely. My Lord. Even in confusion, she still calls him hers. Even in heartbreak, there is love in her words. Her theology is incomplete in that moment. Her interpretation of events is wrong, but her heart is still reaching toward Jesus. That matters. You may not understand what God is doing right now. You may be reading the moment completely wrong. You may be standing in front of evidence you cannot explain. But if your heart is still reaching for Christ, even through tears, you are not abandoned. Confusion does not cancel devotion. Tears do not repel the risen Lord. Then the scene turns so quietly, you could almost miss its power. Verse 14 says, "Now when she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, and did not know that it was Jesus." He is there before she recognizes him. That is a word for somebody today. Jesus can be nearer than your interpretation. He can be present in the very place you have named a loss. He can be standing inside the scene you have already concluded is only about death. Your inability to recognize him does not mean he is absent. It may only mean that grief has blurred your sight. Mary thinks he is the gardener. There is something almost unbearably tender about that. She is speaking to the risen Christ as if he were just another man in the background of her pain. And still, he does not rebuke her. He does not shame her for missing the miracle. He meets her gently, inside the limits of what she can presently bear. Jesus says the same question the angels asked, but then he adds another one. "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" That second question goes deeper. Not just, "Why are you crying?" but, "What are you truly looking for? What have you come here expecting to find? A dead Christ? A memory? A place to bury your last hope?" Sometimes you and I stand in places of disappointment and keep searching for what used to be, while the living Christ is calling us into what now is. We keep asking God to return us to the version of the story we lost. And Jesus, alive and present, is leading us somewhere greater than restoration of the old. He is unveiling new creation. But Mary cannot see it yet. So Jesus does what only he can do. He says her name, Mary. That is the moment everything changes. Not when the stone was rolled away, not when the angels appeared, not even when she first saw Jesus with her eyes. The turning point comes when the risen Lord speaks personally into her grief. He says her name, and suddenly the darkness cracks. This is how Jesus often meets you. Not always with an explanation, not always with a timeline, not always by answering every question you brought to the tomb, but by making himself known, by calling you personally, by bringing the shock of his living presence into the place you thought only held endings. And when he calls your name, you begin to realize the grave was not the end of the story. It was the place where your understanding ended and his power began. Maybe that is where you are today. Maybe you have been staring at a sealed place in your life, a prayer that seems buried, a relationship that looks beyond repair, a dream you wrapped in faith and watched collapse. And you have quietly concluded, this is where it ended. But the resurrection of Jesus means endings are not always endings. It means the places you visit to mourn may become the places where Christ reveals his glory. It means despair is not sovereign, death is not final, and what looks empty is not necessarily hopeless. Notice this too. Jesus does not leave Mary in private comfort only. He sends her. He says, "Go to my brethren and say to them that I am ascending to my Father and your Father." The first witness of the resurrection is a grieving woman who came to the tomb expecting loss. That is just like God. He loves to turn mourners into messengers. He loves to take the one who came trembling and make her the one who says, "I have seen the Lord." He does not wait for polished people with perfect composure. He reveals himself to the broken, and then he entrusts them with truth. So here is the invitation for today. Bring your honest grief to Jesus. Bring the part of your life that feels closed, cold, and final. Bring the disappointment you cannot dress up in religious language. Stand there if you must. Weep there if you must. But do not assume the tomb means Jesus is gone. He may be nearer than you think. He may already be standing in the place you called ruined. And if you listen closely, beneath the noise of fear and the ache of loss, you may hear the voice that changes everything. Not a theory, not a slogan, a living Savior speaking with personal authority and impossible tenderness, calling your name. This is extreme faith. Until next time.